Nuns, demons, curses, haunted objects, exorcisms. No, it's not just another fun Saturday night at home. Tonight we're talking about the Conjuring universe, because why not? Everybody else is.
The spooky spookies.
Podcast 10 what the fuck?
We are going to go through the Conjuring movies in theatrical release order.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to preface this with, we are discussing them as movies, their merit as movies.
Yeah.
Not the fact of whether or not they're based on true stories.
Well, I mean, we plan on getting into the actual history of those events just a little bit.
Well, we want to show exactly how much creative liberty they took.
Right, but we're mainly
true stories.
We're mainly going to be getting into like just the film aspects of it, not so much like the true stories. So there will be spoilers,
and we will of course be discussing the Warrens, who are the inspiration for these movies.
I will try my best not to dunk on Ed Warren. I'll try.
Be good.
I'll think about it.
Okay. So, first up, in theatrical release order, we have The Conjuring, released in 2013. The first Conjuring movie is set in Harrisville, Rhode Island, in the year 1971, and it goes over the Perron family case.
And this is the movie that pretty much introduces us to
Ed and Lorraine Warren.
This theatrical film version of Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Yes.
Yes.
So, the actual Warren case that involved the Perron family, it's a pretty popular case. It was investigated by more people than just the Warrens.
Mm-hmm.
It's even popped, it's reared its head again in recent times on paranormal investigator shows.
Mm-hmm.
And the actual case, as far as the Warrens' involvement in it,
it's very minimal.
Well, they investigated multiple times. They were contacted by a friend of the Perron family and called to come investigate. And the last time they were there investigating, Lorraine brought in a medium to help, and they decided to do a seance, and the father of the Perron family, Roger, kicked the Warrens out.
Yeah, he pretty much felt like they just made things worse.
Yes.
Didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. The kids said that too. Andrea is the oldest child, and she's written a book. She goes around and talks about the Perron case in various locations. And she said that after they showed up, things got worse. The truth, we're not going to debate whether paranormal occurrences are real or not, but the truth, according to Andrea, about the Perron haunting, was that there were probably multiple spirits there, intelligent and residual, mainly benevolent. Bad things didn't really happen. They had the usual knocking, weird sounds, and they did have one entity that kind of picked on the mom a little, and people inferred that it was because this entity felt like they were, the head of the household. It was another female, and she was infatuated with Roger and saw Carolyn, the mother, as a threat. There is a little bit of historical truth to the Bathsheba character in the Conjuring movie. There was a woman who lived on the property named Bathsheba Sherman in the mid-1800s. She was possibly involved in causing the death of not one of her children, but a neighbor's child. But there was never even enough proof for that to go to trial. She was never hanged.
Right.
She was rumored to be a witch, but who wasn't in the 1800s? And she lost a lot of her own children, they died young, but that was also common during those times. So there's no, I don't want to say proof, but like there's no hard evidence that this is the entity that was tormenting this family.
Right.
There's also no evidence, even from the Warrens' own case files, that they were as involved in this case as the movie makes them out to be.
Right.
Now, as far as the movie goes,
before we get into the movie, I would like to say just this little thing. Andrea Perrin, I can't remember what her last name is now, or if she ever got married or anything. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
But she recently came out with a video asking people to stop going to the house.
Well, it wasn't recent. It was,
Stop.
She came out with that video in like 2014.
Right, but
because-
she also just came out with another one because apparently that's become a big thing again.
Well, those people don't even own the house anymore.
Well, that's
The
what I'm
people
saying.
that owned the house in 2013 don't own the house anymore. The people that actually own the house now are paranormal investigators.
Oh, okay.
They
Well, I mean, either way,
bought the house.
either way, if you don't have permission to be there, don't go there.
Yeah, well, that goes for like any, filming location or anything that's like based on something, it's private property.
Unless it's like a public place.
Even
Don't do that.
still, you don't really have any business being there. But
Right.
yeah, it's been since 2013. I'm not sure exactly when. I think it was like around 2018. Don't quote me on that, but it was purchased by a family, and the mother and father of that family are paranormal investigators, and they purchased it with the intent of actually living there and continuing investigating what's going on in that house. But the kids have come back and visited the house.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to put in that little
It's-
disclaimer where she
Right.
basically is asking people, don't go to the house unless you're invited.
Yeah.
Don't go to the
But-
graveyard unless you're invited. And apparently people have a bad tendency to like mess with the headstone and everything.
I think they destroyed Bathsheba's headstone,
Yeah.
which that was not even on the property. She was actually buried in the cemetery down the street, which I think was like a Baptist cemetery.
I'm not
It was
sure.
some type of religious cemetery, but she was buried down the street. But that's like, that gives you a little bit of insight into how much creative liberty they took
Right.
with this first Conjuring story.
Right.
It wasn't nearly as, the Warrens weren't nearly as involved as they made it seem, and there was no resolution. The family continued to live in the house for 10 more years.
Yeah.
And there was no exorcism, nothing was resolved as far as their case goes.
So let's get into the film.
The film, how did you feel about the film? As far as like, if we're going to discuss ratings.
People who know me, like personally, know how I feel about the Warrens.
Yeah, I
And
remember I
when-
had to force you to watch this movie because I was like,
Yeah.
if you just don't think about how the Warrens are portrayed, don't think about how this is not how this case actually went. These are not the actual things that were reported to have happened in this haunting. Just watch it, going into it thinking, this is a horror movie. This is a fictional story that's loosely based, inspired by
Right.
a true story.
I feel like I need to have that little disclaimer
Right.
beforehand because I fucking hate Ed Warren.
Yes,
I hate him with
I
a
know.
passion. Lorraine, not so much. I have my feelings towards Lorraine, but I hate Ed Warren. So I kind of had to separate. I had a hard time separating those feelings from the movie. But when I did finally go in and watch the film as just a straightforward horror movie, I thought it was actually pretty good.
It was decent.
I really enjoyed it.
It made me excited for more Conjuring movies to come. Pretty much everybody has that opinion. It got 7.2 out of 10 on Rotten Tomatoes, and it was like an overall like A- review from most of the reviewers.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was deemed to be a fairly decent movie.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I had read was that, you know, when they went to the MPAA, they were actually shooting for a PG-13 rating, but the MPAA felt that it was just too scary
Yeah.
to give it a PG-13 rating, so they had to give it an R. So, what was his name? The director, Juan. Anyway, the director, he took that as a badge of honor.
James Wan?
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah, that guy.
That guy.
That dude who did all those movies and did that thing, you know?
He made all of these movies
Right?
that we're talking about, that we've researched.
Yeah.
That guy.
What you researched, I just kind of stood behind and was like, yeah, honey, you go. And just sitting there sipping my coffee.
You
like,
rewatch all those movies.
good job. Good on you.
You
But,
research all those cases.
He felt like that was actually a badge of honor that he was okay with.
Right.
So when all the subsequent movies started getting R ratings, he was fine with it.
Now, I don't think that it was so scary that it only could have an R rating. It did have its moments though.
Yeah.
Like the whole hide and seek game. Like that is creepy even not in a haunted house. Like that is creepy as hell.
Just playing it with normal people, just the
Yeah.
idea of it, just like, whoa.
God damn no.
It's kind of creepy.
No, thank you. Yeah.
But
And the first Conjuring movie is also where we are first introduced to Annabelle. Most people know, even if you haven't seen the Conjuring universe movies, you've heard about Annabelle. So, and the cold opening in this movie is actually set in for the movie's 1968, which there's some discrepancies with all of this stuff.
Right.
But we'll discuss that later. You also get to see Judy, their daughter, in this movie, portrayed as a child. At the time of this case, Judy was 21 years old.
yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah.
But you've got the cold opening scene where the nurses are on the couch discussing Annabelle, and it cuts right into the fact that they're reviewing this in a lecture, and then talks about Frenchie.
I'm sorry, what was his name?
Frenchie.
I'm sorry, what was his name?
Remember Frenchie because... Maurice Thoreau. Remember Frenchie because we'll run into him again later. We'll also run into Annabelle again later.
Spoiler alerts.
This whole thing is full of spoilers. If you're watching this not thinking there's going to be spoilers, like, what drugs are you on?
We're a spoiler podcast.
All right, so moving on.
Fuck you.
The next theatrical release in the Conjuring universe is
Yes.
Annabelle.
Annabelle.
Annabelle is set in Santa Monica, California in the year 1967. It was released in 2014. Now, the actual Warren case about Annabelle looks much different than she does in the movie. The actual Annabelle doll was a fairly large Raggedy Ann doll.
What?
Yes.
It was a large Raggedy Ann doll and not
Yes.
a big spooky porcelain doll. It was a Raggedy Ann doll. You know,
Yes.
not like, you know, 500,000 people say 500,000 times, and I love you.
I love you too. Are we finished?
I'm sorry.
Okay. So the Raggedy Ann doll was purchased in 1970, brand new, from a store.
Which is
By-
actually kind of important.
Yes, by a lady, and given to her daughter Donna, who was a nurse, for her birthday. The Warrens, as far as their involvement with this case, is absolutely nothing.
Literally.
They were called in to take the doll away. That was it. So Donna, about 4 to 6 weeks after being given this Annabelle doll, activity started. They'd found the doll moved. Most people know this story. Just slight movements here and there. Then they'd find the doll in another room or in a room where the door had been closed, and, you know, how'd they get in there? They called a medium and conducted a seance. Now, the medium and Donna say that a 7-year-old named Annabelle died in a field prior to the apartments being built where these nurses lived. And this spirit of this little girl wanted to be given permission to possess this doll so that it could hang around, you know, and have like a physical form and do things. So Donna, after things escalated a little and the doll became what they deemed as violent, which was leaving little notes here and there and choking the fiance in his dream.
So not the chicken.
And then finding scratches on himself later. Donna contacted Father Hagen, who contacted Father Cook, who contacted the Warrens to come and pick up the doll.
So that's a medium that's getting a really bad Yelp review from that one.
So, of course, you know, they give the doll, the Warrens come and pick up the doll, and that's the extent of their involvement in the case. Now, the movie.
Yay, let's get into the movie.
The movie is set in 1967.
Mm-hmm.
And not 1968, or the actual year, which would have been 1970. So remember that. All right, so we have that same cold opening that we had.
I'm not going to remember that.
Yeah, we have that same cold opening that we had in the Conjuring film, where the Warrens are discussing with the two nurses and the one nurse's fiance, not Debbie's fiance, the other nurse. Don't remember her name.
Too many details.
Doesn't matter. Yeah. Discussing how they're going to take Annabelle, and it's not the spirit of a little girl, it's a demon, because, you know, if you're a Warren, everything's a demon. So they have this conversation with them, take Annabelle, and then we cut to the church, which is where we supposedly see all the things that happened with Annabelle before she came to be in the possession of the nurse. Because in this movie, they say that Annabelle was used. And this is not her beginning. She's been around for quite some time. So, this is our first introduction to Father Perez. Remember Father Perez. We'll see him later in a movie that has sparked some controversy of whether or not it is actually in the Conjuring universe. So remember Father Perez.
Remember that name, because I won't.
We are introduced to Pete and Sharon Higgins.
Okay.
And we are introduced to, this is their first introduction, first time we see them. And we are introduced to their neighbors, John and Mia Form. Now, John and Mia Form are going to be the main characters of this story, and the ones that feel the full brunt of Annabelle. We're also introduced in this movie to the cult, the Disciples of the Ram. That's important too.
Okay.
Remember that, because that's going to come up later. Now, something interesting.
Is that like, you know, their version of Carl Ramrod?
No.
No? Right. No. I'm trying to make jokes here, people. It's sucking. My sense of humor is horrible. Horrible.
So in the beginning of the movie, we get the scene where we find out that Pete and Sharon, the neighbors, their daughter is estranged. She's older. She's run off. They think she's joined a cult, which she has in fact joined the cult, the Disciples of the Ram. Her and her boyfriend, we're talking about their adopted daughter now, Annabelle. Mm-hmm. Their adopted daughter, Annabelle, breaks into her house with her boyfriend, kills her parents, wakes up Mia. John runs over, and he'd already given Annabelle as a present to his wife, Mia, who's expecting.
Convenient.
And Annabelle and her boyfriend end up over in John and Mia's house. Things happen. And then it's your basic haunted doll movie.
So Creepy Doll goes around doing all kinds of creepy things.
Doing creepy things, yes.
And then the creepy doll that always follows you.
I have to say, I agree with the reviewers on this one. I didn't care for Annabelle.
I really didn't. I mean, to me, it's forgettable.
It is. It is very forgettable. I don't think the story was interesting.
No.
It got a 4.4 out of 10 on Rotten Tomatoes, and overall, it got like a C rating from reviewers. It wasn't popular. I tend to agree. I didn't really care for it that much.
Mm-hmm.
One thing to note that in Pasadena, California, it begins in Santa Monica and then it transitions to Pasadena, California. And Pasadena is where John and Mia Form move into an apartment complex called Palmeri.
Palmeri. Palmeri.
Yes.
Palmeri.
Spoilers for the Annabelle movies. Every single movie that deals heavily with Annabelle has a place or a character that's named Palmeri. And I have dug and tried to find what this connection is. And there has to be some kind of conspiracy theory behind this because, like, I can't find anything.
It's a conspiracy!
But it is some Easter egg that has something to do with Annabelle. So if you know, please tell me because I have, like, looked.
Leave a comment or something because, like.
But in the Annabelle movie, it is Palmeri Apartments. So that brings us to Conjuring 2.
Conjuring 2.
Released in 2016, set in 1977.
Mm-hmm.
And this one starts off with a cold opening, which talks about the Amityville case in Amityville, New York, 1976. If you don't know
what Amityville is, you need to turn in your horror fan card, okay? Or, you know what? Maybe they're not horror fans. Maybe they don't know Amityville.
Then why would they be listening to this?
I don't know.
All right. So, that's your cold opening. You see things about Amityville. And then we're going to switch to our setting being Connecticut for a bit, because we're in the Warrens' house.
Of course.
And then Enfield, England, in the United Kingdom. So this deals with the Enfield poltergeist case, which is not quite as popular as the Perrin case and not nearly as popular as Amityville, but it is known.
Here's the thing. Over here in America, it's not as well known. But over in England, it is a very big deal. It ranks up there with like the Borley Rectory, a lot of those stories.
So, we have an entire movie devoted to the Enfield haunting. How were the Warrens involved? Well, they weren't.
You can't see now, but my eye is twitching like a mile a minute right now, and it's driving me insane. This is the film that seriously pissed me off when it came to the Warrens because it completely I can't remember his name. It completely foregoes the guy who actually did the investigation.
Maurice Gross.
Yes. It made him look like this bumbling idiot that he was not. Because in the actual case files, he was the one who did all the investigation.
Right. So this occurred in real life from 1977 to 1979 in Enfield, England, in the UK. The Warrens showed up uninvited in 1978, a year after this had been going on, a year after Mr. Gross had been already investigating, as well as other people. A year after it had already become a media circus, so it attracted the attention of the Warrens. Unannounced, stayed for a grand total of 24 hours. Were accused of exaggerating and turning everything into being a demon. And they left.
Well, they didn't exactly leave.
Well, they were kicked out.
Mr. What was his name? Mr. Grossman?
Gross.
I keep messing up his
Maurice
name. I should know
Gross.
these things. Maurice Gross. Basically, he came out and said that Ed Warren came to him and said, hey, we can make a bunch of money off of this story. And that was the point that he was like, no, I want nothing to do with you.
Well, because he was legitimately trying to investigate this and help this family. And to the point where, like, he had actually brought in a parapsychology debunker, Anita Gregory, who is in the movie. And the hauntings abruptly stopped in 1979. The kids have later admitted that it was all a hoax.
Yeah, that they were just messing around.
But the interesting thing about another artistic or creative liberty they took for the movie is it was the mother, Peggy, Janet, and Margaret in real life. The movie added Johnny and Billy and gives us our first introduction to the nun, who we will find out is the demon Balak.
Well, I mean,
It
they
also-
they added the boys because you got to fill in that quota.
Right.
You
You
know.
got to have the boys too. Well, I mean, it made the single mom look to be more needy as far as her struggle
Of course.
goes. Just, more
Of course.
kids.
Yeah, stack on those kids.
Yeah.
You know.
But so we also have another Judy sighting in this movie, portrayed once again as a small child, whereas in real life, during this case, she was 27 years old.
I love the fact that you say that as if it's like you're going to snap a picture of her out in the woods. Like she's going to be just walking across with like her arms spread open,
The big
looking
picture.
over, and then like somebody snaps a picture. We got a Judy sighting!
Yeah, yeah. But so there was quite a bit of creative liberty taken
Yeah.
with this movie.
Well, I mean, not so much because,
But-
like, if you the elements that they took were
from
from
the actual case,
Gross's
right?
investigation
Yeah.
notes.
But as far as like the
His
Warrens
file.
being the heroes and figuring out, what's exactly going on, and
Oh,
going
that was-
back
that
in
was a
and
big
saving
pile of
the
horse
day, and once again, they made it seem like the first Conjuring movie, Ed did an exorcism, and oh no, Ed can't do an exorcism. He's not sanctioned by the church, and blah blah blah. And in this one, they've got Lorraine saving today with like a light exorcism, the calling of the demon's name.
Yeah.
But what interests me is this made me research what exactly is an exorcism.
So, Stacy, what
And-
exactly is an exorcism?
Well, the Warrens are Catholic,
Yes.
so in these movies they're portrayed as devout Catholics.
Dear Catholics, I'm sorry.
So there are actually two types of exorcism.
Two types of exorcism.
Now, the one
The
you're probably most
exorcism.
familiar with is the one you see in the movies. The whole reading of prayers and slinging holy water.
The power
and
of Christ compels
and
you.
swinging your incense
Meh.
around and, smooching your scarf and all that stuff, right?
I'm flinging water
Yeah.
at the camera.
That is a solemn rite of exorcism.
Solemn rite of exorcism.
Solemn rite of exorcism is the one that is the highest level, the one that is nearly impossible to have performed by the church, because there are rules and there are rigorous standards, and a medical doctor sanctioned by the church has to be called in to prove beyond a shadow of the doubt that this person is not mentally ill in any capacity and that there is actually demonic possession happening.
So, whenever you see in a movie where they're trying to get the church to okay an exorcism,
Yes.
they're trying to get them
They're
to
trying
okay
to get a solemn rite
rite.
of exorcism approved, which hardly ever gets approved. Now, there is a minor rite of exorcism. A minor rite of exorcism is the rite of exorcism that happens in every single one of the Warrens cases until you get up to the Smurl case, which we'll touch on that lightly. That's in the 80s, which is what I was hoping The Conjuring 3 was going to be, but that's another story. So the minor rite of exorcism, guess when a minor rite of exorcism is performed? Guess.
When?
Guess.
When
You're taking too
your
long.
mom
You've
walks
got
into
nothing.
the room and catches you jerking it and
no.
is saying you can't see girls anymore, even
Okay.
though you're like 19
All right, okay.
and still living in the basement.
Okay, stop.
Okay.
We're going to stop touching ourselves, okay? We're going to stop talking about that.
Okay.
Bring it back in, okay? Calm down.
No more masturbation jokes, I promise.
A minor rite of exorcism commonly occurs when someone moves into a new house, before a baby gets baptized, before someone who has converted to Catholicism takes their first communion. It's what would commonly be known as a blessing.
I love the fact that you said all that as if you just read it from a script and you totally didn't.
I didn't.
No.
I learned
You,
about
like,
exorcism.
Memorized all of that and you just recited it as if we have a teleprompter right here or
I am
something.
an exorcism aficionado. No.
No, that's about that's
Specialist?
sure.
I don't know.
I think that's the
But-
right word.
Also, that minor rite of exorcism can be performed by a priest, an acolyte, a commoner of the Catholic Church in good standing. So guess what? Ed could have done a minor rite of exorcism. Lorraine could have done a minor rite of exorcism. If you were Catholic, you could do a minor rite of exorcism. You two at home can do minor rites of exorcism.
I am Episcopalian. Is that close enough?
Well, it also discussed other religions. Episcopalian, Baptist, they all have this minor rite of exorcism. The only one that calls it an exorcism is Catholicism. Everybody else just calls it a blessing because
That's all that it is.
it carries more of a positive connotation to say that you're blessing something than to say this is a minor rite of exorcism. It sounds better.
So I could like take some of my water here and like flick it on your forehead right now and just like
Well, that's another
eh.
that's another discrepancy. Holy water is typically only used in a solemn rite of exorcism. A minor rite of exorcism uses anointed oil.
Shit.
Sometimes holy water, but typically it's anointed oil. And it doesn't have like the full-on kit, the exorcist suitcase that looks like the vampire hunting kit that has all the exorcism accoutrement in it. Yeah, that's not, no.
It's not really a
No,
thing.
that's not a thing. Like, it's maybe kind of a thing in a solemn rite of exorcism, which can only also be performed by a priest who specializes in doing exorcisms.
This is totally true. I could totally marry you or do funeral rites and stuff, but I am an ordained minister in the Universal Life Church. Does that count?
I would assume that anyone can do a minor rite of exorcism as far as, like, they're devout and in good standing with their church. So, because the way Catholicism views it is that anyone can do a minor rite of exorcism as long as they're Catholic, because any Catholic parishioner has the power over a demon.
Mm-hmm.
Because, they've got Jesus in their heart and stuff, and I don't know, confession and baptism and things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand Christianity. I'm sorry.
I'm the better
Which is another reason why I wanted to research exorcism.
source.
Because I didn't know much about exorcism. I know of The Exorcist, the movie.
Right.
And I thought that's what exorcism was,
Mm-hmm.
Tying somebody to a bed and flinging water on them and reading scriptures. And I always
And
thought
getting
it was,
puked on?
I thought it was specific Bible verses, but it's actually like specific prayers.
Yeah.
So, I had no idea, so I wanted to research that. So anyway, circling back around, Conjuring 2. Overall, it got a 6.7 out of 10 on Rotten Tomatoes, and it had like an A- overall score. So it was very well received by the reviewers. People liked it.
Once again,
I
go
enjoyed
ahead.
it, but with me being familiar with the infield poltergeist,
Yeah.
I felt like, the same way I would have felt if it was another Amityville movie. It's been
Right.
done to death for me.
Well, for me, this one was a lot harder for me to be able to separate reality from
Right.
the film.
You don't
because
have that suspended disbelief.
right,
because
the film.
You know the Warrens had nothing to do with it.
Well, it's not only that, but it's also the fact that the infield poltergeist actually had another film made that tells the story a whole lot better and a whole lot more along the case file.
Accurately.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was done by the BBC during
It was a
the
miniseries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't
And
remember what it's called at the top of my head, but
The Infield Haunting.
yeah.
is what it
But
was
that
called.
is a much. But
was
if
very
you
good.
really want to know the story of what happened, find that, because that is a much better version. But as a just straightforward movie, sure, it was passable. It was pretty
okay.
good.
I was a little disappointed because I really did like the first one. Mm-hmm. I did not watch Annabelle when it came out. I have only recently watched Annabelle and was disappointed by it. So when I watched the second Conjuring movie, I was a little disappointed because I felt like the first one had that. It just nailed that atmospheric horror vibe so much.
Right.
And that's what I really enjoyed. And this one, it had its moments, but overall, it just left you, if you look at it just as a movie and you don't know anything about the case, the entire movie wants you to question whether these things are actually happening or not, or if these kids are,
Yeah.
or if it's a hoax.
Well, that was a major part of the actual case file.
And I understand that, and I appreciate that they did it that way, but I would have liked to have seen it played more up to this is legitimately happening, and it's terrifying.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, one thing that I do like that really came out of The Conjuring 2, the Crooked Man. We've been promised that we will see the Crooked Man in a Conjuring movie sometime in the future, and I hope that we do.
I don't see how, though.
I don't either, because, they came to the conclusion that it was Valak controlling this poor entity that was trying to possess Janet. And,
Spoiler alert.
well, we're going to eventually discuss Valak when we get to the nun.
I know.
So, it seems like the Crooked Man would also as well be just another way that Valak was presenting itself. So if she really has banished Valak,
Right. I would think that it's
back
kind
to
of
hell,
difficult to
as
have
they
that
imply.
character
Exactly.
make a return.
Exactly. So
I'm curious, though.
I would love to see something with the Crooked Man in it. If nothing else, maybe like a spin-off movie of the Nun where the Nun is presenting itself as the Crooked Man and have a whole Crooked Man Valak movie. I don't know.
I don't know.
No, but
I'm sure they could figure something out.
so the next in the theatrical release lineup is Annabelle Creation,
Yay.
released in 2017. I didn't hate it. It has nothing to do with a Warren case. And we've already discussed Annabelle, okay? So this is supposedly Annabelle's origin story, which we know is not true because the doll was bought new in 1970 from a store.
Right.
So this takes place in California in 1943. We are introduced to the Mullins Toy Company, which is Sam and Esther Mullins, and their daughter, Annabelle B. Mullins, who dies tragically in a car accident, which, interestingly enough, when Ed would take people through the occult museum and show them Annabelle, that was his story for Annabelle Higgins, Not that she died in the field, like the medium said, but that she died in a car accident out in front of the apartment building.
Can I talk trash about
No.
Ed Warren? Damn it.
No.
Just once.
So poor Annabelle Mullins dies in a car accident. We jump to 1955, where Sam and Esther have decided to take in a nun and a group of orphans, give them a place to live, kind of like maybe a foster care type, they don't have an orphanage to go to bring life back into the house. And then we get into the meat of the story of, how the Annabelle doll came to be possessed and by who or what. And we also have that name again, Palmieri. In one of the opening scenes, Victor Palmieri is the shopkeeper of Palmieri Toy Shop, who comes up and asks Sam and Esther when the next shipment of dolls will be ready. So there's that name again. What does it mean?
Honestly, the only connection that we've found is that there was a producer whose last name is Palmieri.
But she
that
doesn't
worked on
come
these
onto the
movies, but she
scene-
doesn't work on all the movies that have her name in it. So
Unless she's uncredited.
yeah.
She doesn't come onto the scene until like 2018 to start helping with the Annabelle movies.
It just kind of makes me wonder.
This is also your second nod to the nun character, where Sister Charlotte shows a picture of her being at the Abbey, and Samuel's like, "Oh, well, who's this over here? Like a holographic picture here that we've got in the 1950s."
That kind of made me wonder. I
And
mean,
she's
they
like,
made it seem like
I
that
know,
it was
right?
just like a slight visual
It's
flaw.
a holographic trading
But
card.
it's just like when
Yeah.
you were a kid and
Yeah.
you're taking those hologram cards and you're going, oh yeah, that effect just like
The
totally.
newest- Get your newest Pokemon foil card, the Nun.
Mommy, I don't think I want this card anymore.
And then, of course, the movie ends with a replay of the Higgins death scene from the original Annabelle movie, where it shows her being adopted.
Spoiler alert.
You don't have to keep saying that.
Spoiler
we know
alert.
that it shows her being adopted, the Janice character being adopted and changing her name to Annabelle, and then coming back however many years later. I'm not doing the math right now.
Yeah.
And killing the Higginses and Mia waking up. So that's where the movie ends. Now, overall, I didn't hate this movie.
No.
As far as an origin story goes, I actually thought it was fairly decent.
Yeah.
I really did. You had a lot of interesting visuals with Valak presenting itself as Annabelle, the little girl Annabelle. That's
Oh,
her
that's not
tapping on the
Valak.
windows.
That's
Not
not
Valak.
Valak.
I'm so sorry. It's not Valak.
It's what is that demon's name? I don't remember. Starts with an M.
It's Other Demon.
Other demon.
It's Other Demon.
That's what it is. It's Valak Light.
Valak's demon brother from another mother. But yeah, it's it has some interesting moments. Like
It
it
does.
had the atmospheric horror vibe that I like. It had some of the definitely had some of the jump scare moments, and overall I enjoyed it better than the first Annabelle movie. So Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 6.2 out of 10, and it got like overall middle of the road reviews like C.
The demon's name is Malthus.
Malthus.
Yeah, Malthus.
Okay.
Malthus. Now, I liked it in that I thought, okay, I was kind of curious as to how they were going to tie it to the other, and I just hit the microphone. I was kind of curious how they were going to tie it to the other Annabelle movie, because the other Annabelle movie as far as I understood, was supposed to be how Annabelle gets,
Well, they made it seem like that in that movie, that she was possessed by
the spirit of the woman.
When she died.
Right. But I was kind of curious because they're like, oh, this is the origin of Annabelle.
Right.
And like when it first came out, I thought you already did that. So I was kind of curious as to how they were going to tie that together. And I feel like that they kind of tied that pretty well. Overall, the movie itself, okay, it's not bad. I liked it. It was pretty good. It wasn't my favorite,
but out of the Annabelle movies we've discussed thus far, it was the better of the two.
Yeah, it was the better of the two. Not my favorite from the Conjuringverse, but it ranks up there. I thought it was pretty good.
So the next release we have is The Nun, released in 2018, set in 1952 Romania at St. Cartha's Abbey. In 2018, out of all the movies that were released thus far, this one became my favorite at that time. I have a new favorite now, but at that time, this was my favorite. It's the origin story of the nun, or Valak. Has nothing to do with the Warrens at all, like as far as like real life.
So another one that's not based on a case or anything,
right.
or
yeah. The only tie to the other Conjuring movies,
I don't know,
is the end scene.
I don't know. Valak seems to be like one of the big bads of the entire series.
I mean, like visually, the only tie to the other movies.
Okay, from this movie to the other
is
movies.
The end scene,
okay.
Where you've got the Warrens showing you Frenchie's exorcism during a lecture, which also ties it into the first Conjuring movie, because then they tilt up, and you've got Mama Carolyn sitting in the audience, which that never happened. But
right.
We know that.
Well, they had to tie it together.
Yeah,
somehow.
so they tied it together. But I absolutely enjoyed The Nun. I thought it was great for atmospheric horror. I thought it had just enough jump scares.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it had an interesting story that I wanted to keep watching to see how everything turned out.
Right.
The ending was a little anticlimactic for me.
Really?
Yeah, the whole scene with the drowning and the blood of Christ, and
I actually I actually kind of liked that ending a little bit.
Did you just see that orb?
Did we have an orb? You mean the particle of dust that was floating around right there?
It was a demon.
We demonized. Oh,
because we keep saying these demons.
Oh my God.
Okay, so
Wayne's going to hell.
So it got a 4 out of 10 on Rotten Tomatoes and an overall middle of the road review. So most people didn't care for The Nun.
Yeah, I disagree.
I thought it was creepy as hell, and I really liked it.
I actually really kind of enjoyed it. I mean, I could see where a lot of people could be like, "Oh, this is just another one of those ghost demon movies," but like, I can't help but feel like that it was actually really well done.
I feel like a lot of people didn't like it, and this is just my opinion. I feel like they didn't like it because it was a period piece.
Yeah.
It went too far outside of the Conjuring universe, because if you watch them in chronological order, this is going to be your first one.
Well, not only that, but it's also taken place in Romania.
Yeah.
Which is like not exactly known for being up on technology.
Right.
Well,
I mean, it was
there was another one. There was another one. Did you see it?
I'm ignoring the orbs.
Anyway.
You know what this tells me? I need to dust.
Yeah.
That's what this tells me.
We need to dust in here. But
so, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on The Nun.
Well, see,
other than I really liked it.
I do want to say this. The director of The Nun has a really good eye for horror, because it was mostly creepy, scary, kind of, that creepy, foreboding feeling.
Yeah.
couple jokes here and there, just kind of spattered
Yeah.
in, just to kind of break that tension. But whenever there was a tense moment, it was tense.
That's another thing that I like about all of the movies in the Conjuring universe is they do pepper in that little bit of humor.
Yeah,
There's a little bit of comedy. So you have that downtime in between
right.
your intense
Right.
scenes.
But what I really loved was like, whenever it showed Valak, it wasn't just, oh, here's Valak.
Right.
It was a big, tense, like
Yeah.
you saw Valak
Yeah.
walking through the shadows, and then there's the huge scare.
Yeah.
Or you see Valak like stepping up out of the water, and you've got the male chorus, like, oh, you know, just like doing that. And it was just intense, you know. So I can't remember his name right now, but the director of The Nun, who also directed a good portion of the other movies, really does a great job and really understands the psychology of horror.
Right. Yeah.
So I
Building that
really,
suspense.
yeah,
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
So then we're moving on to The Curse of La Llorona. Now there is some debate.
La 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 woo. Do 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 do. I'm sorry.
Are you finished?
Yes, go ahead.
So
La Llorona. Come back. She's mad at me now.
there's some controversy as to whether or not this is actually in the Conjuring universe because it didn't include the full production team that has worked on every single other Conjuring universe movie. But you've got Father Perez, who was in Annabelle. He alludes to the Warrens. He makes mention of Annabelle in a, not underhanded, but like in a,
Subliminal.
well, there's a
There's a very
there's a flashback.
light. There's a
Yeah.
very light reference
right.
to Annabelle.
But
in
I
this.
would like to include this because I think it fits in with the Conjuring universe.
I think it absolutely fits.
And I enjoyed it. It's set in 1973, and it deals with the curse of La Llorona, which, you know, is a Mexican tale from, they're setting this one here in 1673, of a wife who drowns both of her children to get revenge on their father.
Now that's a concept I've never really understood.
Well, you have to understand at that time, the important thing is carrying on your bloodline.
Yeah.
So if you want to get revenge on a male, especially since these were two boys, which would have carried on his name, carried
Right.
on his bloodline, kill his children. You're castrating him.
Which, I mean, that makes sense, but it
Because
just...
his family ends there. You know,
wow.
his legacy is over.
I get that. I just...
As a parent, I
As
couldn't
a-
imagine using that as revenge, but culturally and for the time period, it's somewhat understandable.
Okay.
It got a 4.6 out of 10 on Rotten Tomatoes, like a B average review, a little bit better than some of the other Conjuring Universe movies.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed it. I liked the humor of the character Raphael Olvera.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was quite humorous.
Oh, you talk about the...
Yeah.
Yeah, basically Father Perez says that the church can't help him. So he sends the main character, the mother,
Yes.
to this guy Raphael, and he basically plays as the exorcist character
Yeah, he
in this,
practices
but
more
like,
in the occult. He was a
Yeah.
priest, but he practices more in the occult now.
yeah, he's
In the sense
fun.
that when one knows enough about the occult or is a demonologist, they're more prepared to battle these things with the help of God.
Basically, he said
Not that he was an occultist.
being a priest was just the beginning of what
Exactly.
he wanted to do.
Yeah, he felt like he could help on a deeper level.
Right.
But he had a very, very
He
dry
was fun.
sense of humor, and he was fun. I liked him a lot.
He was fun. I liked
I
him.
did enjoy this movie. It was a very cut and dry ghost story.
Yeah.
Curse, ghost
Yeah,
story.
pretty much.
But I thought it was fun. I enjoyed it. It didn't have as much atmospheric horror in it. There was a lot more blatant, in your face, this is the ghost and this is what they're doing.
Right.
There were a few jump scares. And it wasn't really a psychological horror either.
It really
I'm not
wasn't.
really sure what genre of horror I would classify.
It's just a
it
ghost
as.
story.
It was just a ghost
That's
story, I
all
guess.
that's all that it is it's
Yeah.
just a ghost story, because like there's really nothing much that they put into it. I
But-
mean, if they would have had like a little bit of a psychological edge of like, is this really happening or is the mother going insane?
Right.
That would be one thing. But
That's what
That's
I
not
liked
where they
about
went.
it. It was very realistic in that the main character, Anna Tate Garcia, was a CPS worker, and she was investigating one of her cases. Patricia Alvarez, her children Carlos and Tomas, she was investigating them for truancy, and it was because the mother Patricia was trying to keep her two kids safe because somehow they had attracted this curse of La Llorona. And then, when these things start happening to Anna Tate Garcia herself and her kids, what do? They send a CPS worker to investigate because
Right.
the kids start showing up with marks. And
Right.
that's so very realistic, and a lot of horror movies don't ever explore that side of it, is that, if your kids start showing up with bruises, they're not going to believe that they're getting attacked by some ghost. They're going to point their fingers at you, and they're going to investigate.
right. But one problem that I had with the movie, I mean, other than the fact that it's pretty much just a cookie cutter ghost story, when she goes to investigate her case, her situation that she's supposed to go investigate, she goes in, finds the two boys in the closet,
Yes.
and the mother says, no, just one more day. Just one more day.
Right.
One more day. That's all I need. Just leave them in there for one more day. And then they don't do anything else with that line. I wish that they would have
Yeah.
explained
That was
if
one
there was
thing,
a timeline
Yeah.
that La Llorona has to work on.
That was one thing I did have issues with the movie, is that, like most movies, you do get a little bit of monologuing,
Yeah.
something that like gives you,
Oh,
these
the-
are the rules.
The expedition done.
Yeah, the expedition. It gives you the rules of this curse.
Exposition. I'm sorry. I said expedition. Expedition.
It's an adventure.
Expedition dump.
Okay, so I mean, typically in these kind of ghost movies, by the middle of the movie, you've got your rules.
Right.
7
Right.
days.
Well, what happens if you're able to make it past the 7 days?
Exactly.
know.
But by now you've got your rules. You've got this many days, or this is what's going to happen to you, or once this happens, like the bruising,
Right.
this is the next thing you're going to expect. You've got your rules by the middle of the movie. They never really established that. They never really established, this is how you get rid of her.
Mm-hmm.
They never established anything.
See, that was the thing for me, was that I was waiting for them to make mention of
Yeah.
a time limit.
Yeah.
Because her saying just one more day, I'm going, okay, I know what the movie's about. What rules are you going to set aside
Exactly.
for how this is
Yeah.
going to go down? But they never mention anything else about that line for the rest of the
assumed
movie.
Once Raphael got involved, we were going to get at least a little bit of exposition, because he's like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I know exactly what you're dealing with. Yeah, Tomas and Carlos was dealing with that too. surprise, you
Right.
believe it now, right? Okay,
Right.
so this is what's happening. This is, other than just telling her the story of the curse, which I don't even think he did. I think it was Father Perez that told her the story of the curse. But like, you would have thought that he would have, and maybe that was edited out. You know, maybe it was cut
Maybe.
for pacing or for time or for whatever. But you would have thought, you would have, at least by that point in the movie, where it was like well past the half point of the movie when Raphael gets involved, you would have thought you would have at least got the rules or some kind of backstory, or this is our plan, you know. But you don't get any of that. I didn't agree with that as far as the storytelling goes, but overall, I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a movie I would watch again.
I was kind of the lower end of middle of the road on this one, just because I've always liked the story of La Llorona, the actual like mythology of it. Always wanted someone to do something with it. Up to this point, I've only seen horrible B movies that deal with this thing.
Yeah.
You know, but like,
Or try to skew it from being a myth or a legend, or and turn it into some political slant.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
change it completely.
Right. But like, I feel kind of let down just because of the fact that there's nothing that really marks this as its own individual film.
Right.
You could take out La Llorona and replace any other spirit
Right.
in this film and it still be the same thing. I feel like that this movie is too by the numbers.
Too cookie cutter.
Yeah, it's too cookie cutter.
I can agree with that.
It's a fill in the blank.
So let's talk about my favorite movie from the Conjuring universe.
Okay.
Even after watching The Conjuring 3, which I was super excited about, Annabelle Comes Home is my favorite Conjuring movie.
I'm going to have to agree with you on that one.
I love Annabelle Comes Home because I love the idea of exploring the things in the artifacts room, the Warren's artifacts room.
Mm-hmm.
So Annabelle Comes Home was released in 2019. It was set in 1969 in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And we're focusing this time on Judy, her babysitter Mary Ellen, and Mary Ellen's friend Daniela. So, interestingly enough, we have Judy, once again, another Judy sighting. And,
Hold on, let me get my camera.
as a child, whereas she would actually have been 19 at this point. And that's a little backstory on Judy. Judy grew up with her grandparents, while Ed and Lorraine Warren traveled around selling Ed's art and teaching art classes. The paranormal investigating aspect of their lives didn't even begin until Judy was an adult.
Right.
So she wouldn't have grown up she would have grown up knowing of her mom's abilities, but she wouldn't have been exposed to like
The lifestyle.
the lifestyle that it's trying to make it seem like in this movie.
Right.
So that
Now-
is a discrepancy.
One thing that I would like to go ahead and put out there is that while this movie is based on various case files of theirs, this situation itself did not
Well,
happen.
actually, there are only 2 things in this movie that are actually from, they call it the artifact room in the Conjuring universe. It's more widely known as the occult museum. It was not in their house. It was next to their house in Monroe, Connecticut. And Judy lived in Brookfield with her grandparents growing up and went to a
Right.
Catholic school. And she actually told the people at school, the administration, that her father was a botanist. because that's what Ed told her to tell them. Because
Okay.
when she asked him, well, what do I tell him that you do? Because this is when he was traveling around teaching art classes and selling his art instead of telling
Attend to spooky plants.
and lightly doing some paranormal investigating.
Honey, just say that they're a botanist. Just say that he's a botanist.
So, Ed told her, well, tell her I'm a botanist. And so that's, so the only two things from this movie that were based on actual objects in the Occult Museum was the Black Shuck, which was a ghost dog from England. It was an omen of death or bringer of death, like the Grimm in the Harry Potter movies. They went to England to investigate a string of livestock deaths and trapped this demon of the Black Shuck in a book about it and brought that book back to the Occult Museum to end the death of the livestock.
Wait.
Yeah.
So they trapped the spirit of the Black Shuck.
Who's a demon? Because it's always a demon.
In a book
About
the
Black Shuck.
The Black Shuck.
Yes. Because it's a legend that goes back, like 1700s.
That's some Harry Potter shit. Like, for real. No.
No harm ever came from reading a book.
That reminds me too much of DC Comics. Okay? Like when in the Harley series, when she finds the Queen of Fables, and Queen of Fables is like a tax adjuster or something like that, but she's just like a book, like sitting on a desk, like flapping her mouth and got a cigarette hanging out and everything. That's some bullshit. That is some bullshit.
Expect like sometime in the future the book would just be like, moisturize me. And so then the second artifact, the piano that Daniela plays when she breaks into the Occult Museum, or the artifact room as it's known in this movie, is based on an organ that was taken from the house of a reverend that was reported to be haunted, and it was taken from his house after he passed away before the house caught fire.
Right.
And it's loosely based on that. My favorite character from this movie, the ferryman, is based on the myth of the ferryman, that Charon, who, whether it's Greek or Roman, he either helps people cross the river Styx or the swamps of the river Acheron.
Oh, Chiron.
Yeah,
Chiron,
a psychopomp, which is just a fun word to say.
Oh, fun.
Psychopomp. So he's, the guide for the dead. Not inspired by anything from the Occult Museum or any cases. It was just, fun to throw that in there.
Just a fun little character to toss in.
The bride in this movie is inspired by a mannequin in a white dress, which is a recreation of the White Lady of Union Graveyard in Connecticut.
So the dress is not really haunted at all. It's
a recreation.
It's a wax figure.
No, it's a mannequin. It's
No. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Theoretically, it's just supposed to be like, hey, then there's this, and it's not really the thing, but
it's a museum.
It looks like
recreation piece. Yeah.
Sure.
The Feely McNeely game, which was an actual Milton Bradley game.
Yeah.
In 1967, that has nothing to do with the Occult Museum. There's
I'm not surprised.
no samurai suit in the Occult Museum.
What?
No.
What?
There's no TV in the Occult Museum, especially not one that can show you your future.
I'm more heartbroken by the fact that
no
samurai
suit.
armor is not there, man.
But the inspiration for the TV may have been the conjuring mirror that is in the Occult Museum that is reported that a man used to stare into it, like similar to a scrying mirror, but he'd use a red bulb to communicate with spirits. There's no phone in the occult museum, or if there is, there's nothing that like directly inspires the
Right.
phone that she answers in, or almost answers in the movie. That, you know, we don't see the effects of that. And the mourner's bracelet, which plays a big part in the movie, is maybe possibly inspired by the pearls of death, a cursed necklace that strangles the wearer.
Mm.
So, most of the things were made up just specifically for this movie.
Just for the movie, yeah.
But I enjoyed that very much. Now, you, of course, have Annabelle in this movie.
Of course,
Because
she has to
she's,
be.
you know, the
She's the title
centerpiece
character.
Of the occult museum. And since Annabelle is featured prominently in this movie, Bob's got balls. Mary Ellen's love interest,
Wait, what's his last name?
Pal Mary,
Oh.
who works at his dad's grocery store, Pal Mary's Market.
What
does this work?
No!
What does this have to do with Annabelle?
Conspiracy! Anyway.
I'm eventually going to find out. I'm going to keep doing research on this and find out because I need to know.
And when it turns out to be nothing, you're going to pull your hair out.
Probably.
Yeah.
So it got a 5.9 out of 10 on Rotten Tomatoes and like an overall like B- review from critics.
I could see that.
I could see that, but I don't necessarily agree with it. Like, I really enjoyed this movie. It kept me interested the entire time. It had atmospheric horror. It had jump scares. It had suspense. It had an overwhelming, just overall feeling of dread.
Mm-hmm.
It had some twists. It made you very invested in the main characters, like right away. Like you wanted all of them to survive, especially Bob's got balls fighting the black shuck.
Which interesting.
With his guitar.
Interesting. Something that because when we were watching that movie, you know, it's supposed to be the black shuck. I kind of know the Warren's case files a little bit beyond that. And I thought that it was supposed to be the South End werewolf.
Yeah, they said that it could have been that as well, but when she first goes into the artifacts room, she actually picks up the book of the Black Shuck.
Yeah,
and it
no,
shows
that makes sense in the film.
It foreshadows her touching every single thing that's going to happen later.
I can't help but feel like that if they would have tied the South End werewolf to it instead of the Black Shuck, because the Black Shuck is a totally different thing.
Right.
South End werewolf would have fit in better in that
It
role.
would have. It's also been rumored that their inspiration was also there was a stuffed tiger in the occult museum, which was a representation.
Another one
of a man who used to be, for lack of a better term, an animagus,
a skinwalker.
Could turn himself into. Not turn himself into this tiger, but could possess other animals and become them that way.
Well, I mean,
they Ed kind of explained it a little bit as necromancy, and I don't think Ed knows what
that's
necromancy
not
is.
necromancy.
Yeah, but so there's that. I mean, there's
Oh
multiple.
my God.
But I agree with you. I think the werewolf would have, for what happened in the movie, it would have fit better being the werewolf instead of the black shuck.
Yeah.
It would have.
That was like my only negative that I had, but that was more of a personal preference thing. This one actually was, I felt like, was a lot of fun to watch.
Yes, it was.
You know,
and it was very interesting because you don't have just the one. Well, you've got like the one main antagonist, which would be Annabelle.
Yeah,
but you've got all of the other side cases and things like coming to life. So it's not like you have just one enemy. It's chaos and everything everywhere. And it really amped up that feeling of dread.
Well, I mean, the whole point of the movie is the fact that because Malthus is able to get out, he then goes around setting everybody else free. And there are some people are saying that there was a tie where like Valak was in there too. I don't see how. I see this as more of Malthus running around causing all these problems.
No, the Easter egg nod to the nun was just the fact that they had since put they had added Ed's painting of the nun to the artifact room. It wasn't a haunted object, just a painting he had done of the demon.
Sure.
The painting that he had done in Conjuring 2.
Yeah.
Was added to the artifact room. And you saw it as she's walking in. So it was more of like a nun Easter egg.
Mm-hmm.
But no, Valak wasn't involved. But I think what they really wanted you to take away from the movie overall was Judy was supposedly coming to terms with the fact that she had the same abilities her mother has, which she does not. A lesser degree, she's had like prophetic dreams in real life.
Yeah,
from
and
time
that's
to time,
pretty
and
much
she
it.
ignores it because she doesn't want to have anything to do with anything paranormal, other than her husband, who's running all of the Warren estate now, and is a paranormal investigator. But Judy's coming to terms with the fact that like she's seeing spirits now in the movie,
Right.
and she has to on her own come to realize that not all ghosts are bad and not all spirits are bad, which is an interesting lesson to learn that not everything is a demon.
That's a jab right to the eye to all of Ed and Lorraine's
So yeah, so
investigations.
It's more of a paranormal coming of age story concerning Judy. And one last thing about the actual occult museum, which is located in Moreau beside the Warrens' house.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot take tours anymore. It has been closed due to zoning violations.
Oops.
So,
Good job on that one.
we come to what is, for now, the last movie in the Conjuring universe. Released,
Finally, I mean,
yes. Released in 2021, set in 1981, we have The Conjuring 3.
I was 1 year old. No, I wasn't. I wasn't, because it wasn't September yet. Anyway.
Well, I'm not sure, because their timeline doesn't really match up too well with the
Oh, I'm not talking about reality.
actual case timeline.
I'm talking about in my imagination here.
So let's get into the actual case. Apparently, this was big. I've never heard of it before.
I'd heard of it.
case.
I'd heard of it because growing up in the Baptist church, we were constantly told about all these demonic happenings that were happening throughout the world. So I got to hear about this quite a bit. It's nothing like what they portray in The Conjuring 3 at all.
No, so
But-
let's talk about
yeah.
the actual case. Okay, so the actual case, much like the movie, begins with David Gladzel.
Mm-hmm.
All right. This is the poor little boy that was supposed to have been possessed by 43 demons. And there were 6 Catholic priests called in to do minor rites of exorcism over this child
Wait.
on several occasions.
So not solemn rites,
No,
minor rites.
a blessing.
So pretty much the same as me going
Bless
and
them,
like thumping your head.
bless
and be
them 43 demons at this boy.
like,
Yeah,
like the faith healers or something.
right. So
Yeah.
keep that in mind. They didn't ever do a solemn rite of exorcism on little David Glatzel.
No.
Okay? So I guess we'll just get right into Arnie's sister's name was Debbie. There was also another sister named Wanda who's not in the movie.
Mm.
There was a brother named Carl Jr. and of course Carl Sr. is the father. And the mother was somebody.
Not
important. I didn't write down her name. I think it was just like we'll call her Mama Glatzel.
Mom.
Yeah,
Mama Glatzel.
Okay. So anyway,
Mama.
So anyway,
I've come home.
Poor little David is helping Arnie, who is Debbie, David's sister's boyfriend. Arnie and Debbie are moving into a rental house with Arnie's mother.
Mm-hmm.
And so Carl Jr. and David, perhaps Wanda, I'm not sure. There are different accounts. The details are foggy.
The details on how this happens differs depending on who you ask.
Well, I've noticed that with most of the research I've done on these cases.
All the cases are like this.
It's a lot like oral history when it gets passed down and it just gets embellished and things change. So Debbie and Arnie bring the kids along to help them clean this rental property that they're moving into with Arnie's mother. David and Carl Jr. supposedly see some paranormal stuff go down. Everybody leaves except for David. David's in the room by himself. This is where we assume that the demonic attachment first takes place. David's scared. I think it's kids being kids, not trying to get out of cleaning, but you know, it is what it is. We're going to assume that this is legitimate. This is true. All of this happened. So over a matter of time, in the 1980s, David's mother contacts the local church to have minor rites of exorcism done on David. The Warrens were called in by a priest, I'm assuming that they had in their pocket, who heard of these things going on and said, hey, you might be interested in this. So the Warrens show up and have 3 more minor rites of exorcism performed. This is over quite a large amount of time, months. And they eventually get to the point where supposedly during one of these minor rites of exorcism, Arnie's like, leave the boy alone. Pick on somebody your own size,
Come into me.
Come into me.
Come into me.
So, this all ends in October of 1980. They say that David is better.
He's no longer possessed.
He's no longer possessed. He's good now. We've gotten rid of the 43 demons with minor rites of exorcism.
Sure.
Yeah. So, keep in mind, this is October 1980. So, Debbie and Arnie decide they don't want to live with Mom, and they never moved into the rental house. Arnie's mom lived there by herself because she had to. She started giving up her apartment. They had moved back in when all this stuff was happening with David. They had moved back in with Debbie's parents.
With the Glatzels.
With the Glatzels. And so they decide that, now that poor little David is okay, they're going to move out on their own. They're going to try again. So they move into this apartment that's a few blocks away from the dog groomer in town, Alan Bono, which his name was changed for the movie. And Debbie works for him as well.
Debbie works at the dog grooming place
for Alan Bono, who is also the landlord of their apartment they're renting.
Right.
In the movie, they've got it all happening like in the same structure, but it's not. They make it seem like, it was a much more intimate relationship where they had to put up with the landlord living right there with them and being drunk
almost
and
like they were
disorderly all the
roommates or
time.
something.
Yeah, that's not how it happened. So
they just hung out together.
Once again, I've got a few different tellings of this story, what actually went down on the day that Alan Bono was killed.
So would you say that it's unreliable?
Probably. So the general consensus is that in February of 1981, that demon's biding its time.
So from October
to February. Yes.
Okay.
In February of 1981, Alan, the landlord, went to lunch with Debbie Glatzel, her boyfriend Arnie Johnson, Debbie's sister Wanda, and Debbie's cousin Mary, who was a child, a 9-year-old. I don't know how that's relevant, but it may be important. It was mentioned in a couple different articles that the child was 9.
Right.
I guess we're just establishing, this is a helpless child.
Mm-hmm.
They come back from lunch, and they're hanging out, partying. It's unclear whether this is happening at the apartment they're renting or whether it's happening at Alan's house or whether it's happening at his dog groomer business.
Yeah.
I've seen it listed.
All three ways.
If I could read the actual police case report,
that'd be nice.
That would be lovely, but couldn't get my hands on that anywhere. I probably could if I tried hard enough.
Could if we'd have to put in for
anywho.
Releasing the files and everything.
They're hanging out, continuing to drink. They're not saying who's drinking, but we're led to believe that it is Arnie and Alan that are drinking, have become quite intoxicated at this point. Debbie says she's going to go get pizza, and when she comes back, apparently Alan has grabbed onto Mary, the 9-year-old child, is holding her, won't let her go, is intoxicated, threatening things. That was very vague.
I'm picturing Alan holding this 9-year-old girl out in front, completely arm's length, he's trying to show her off to everybody, or Steve Carell walking around with a grenade in his hand, just that's what I'm picturing.
We're not sure what the point of him holding on to Mary was, or what the threats were, or anyhow, Arnie is very protective of this family, which is also portrayed in the movie.
Yeah,
and he's trying to wrestle Mary away from Alan. Gets Mary away. Debbie takes Wanda and Mary off to the side. It doesn't say whether she actually leaves or not, or if she stays. So she may not have witnessed this entire thing at all.
I'm pretty sure that she stayed, because I remember in everything that I've seen on it, she's there to tell the police who did it and what happened. Right.
But what I'm saying is, in actuality, I'm not sure if she was actually there. So we're going to assume she was there. In the heat of the moment, trying to defend Mary and get Alan to back off and stop being drunk and disorderly, Arnie stabs him 4 to 5 times with his pocket knife. And Alan dies at the hospital approximately a few hours later. Arnie is, of course, arrested. They find him wandering, not down the road, but on his way back to the Glatzel's house.
Right.
He's found and arrested. And the next day, I'm not sure. It doesn't say exactly who tipped off the Warrens to the fact that Arnie was arrested. But the next day, Lorraine calls the police department to tell them that Arnie was possessed. And that's why this happened.
I'm pretty sure it was Mama Glatzel
It
that
could have
did
been.
that because
It could have been.
Mama was a big time believer in the Warrens.
It could have been. So the reason why this case became historic was because it was the first time in the United States that a plea of not guilty by virtue of possession was entered in a court of law. Now, that was their first defense plea. It was rejected by the judge because he said that there's no way that they can scientifically prove that Arnie was possessed.
It was
No possible way.
It was like swatted out of that courtroom, like
Yeah.
almost immediately. The judge was like, no,
Yeah.
no, that's not going to work. Try again.
And defense changed it to a self-defense plea.
Mhm.
Not guilty by self-defense. Now, he was found guilty of a lesser charge, first-degree manslaughter,
Mhm.
convicted to 10 to 20 years, and he served just about 5, not quite 5 years, and
Right.
got out on
Good behavior.
good behavior.
Yeah.
Yes. So, other than the Warrens being around for David Gladsel's minor rites of exorcism, they were not really involved at all in Arnie's case, other than going on TV shows and doing interviews
And saying that he was
that
possessed.
Arnie was possessed.
So another Ed Warren special.
I think it was Debbie that had called the Warrens
Really?
and said Arnie had been arrested for murder.
I could see that.
Now that I think about it, I want to say it was Debbie.
But basically the movie,
The movie makes it seem like they were extremely involved the entire time and that there's some conspiracy with the disciples of the Ram cult. We learned about them in Annabelle.
right, but they at some point, either in this movie or a previous movie, they talked about how this cult had been. No, it was this movie. Because
Yes.
yeah. The cult had been disbanded
Right.
at this point.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know if I want to go into spoilers on this one just because like it's so new.
Yeah, exactly. So what I did want to say, well, I mean, if you know of the case, you've pretty much got spoilers for the movie, but not. I mean, it focuses more on the cult.
The major
figuring
difference,
things
the
out.
major difference between the movie and the actual case is that it's more like a who done it.
Yeah, it plays
Ed
out
and
more like a
Lorraine,
mystery.
Ed and Lorraine pretty much are doing their impression of Seven, you know, where they're trying to find evidence to show that Arnie was actually possessed, and they're looking for proof
Right.
of it, and they stumble across this person who's using satanic magic and dark magic to cause all these things to happen, and
Well,
it
spoilers.
becomes a big.
And it becomes figuring out who that is and where they are,
Yeah.
and how can we stop this. It felt more like a cop drama to me, and
Yeah.
I didn't care for it at all.
It felt like Seven to me. It felt like you know.
We do have, though, the mention of the disciples of the Ram cult, which it's more than a mention. It's a big part of this movie,
Right.
which gives us our Annabelle tie-in. So we have Palmieri Funeral Home in Danvers, Massachusetts.
No!
Yes.
You're kidding me.
What is this connection?
I'm telling.
What is
I'm
it?
gonna come in the room one time, and you're gonna have like pictures all over the room, and like strings
Yeah, the
all
red
over the
string.
place, and
Yeah.
you're gonna turn around and be like, "It's a conspiracy."
My cigarette.
Yeah. Now listen, man. Just listen.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So it got a 5.9 out of 10 on Rotten Tomatoes. overall, it was a little bit higher than middle of the road reviews. I think because it had such a completely different feel
Yeah.
than all of the other Conjuring movies.
Yeah. No, I mean, people that I've talked to about it, they all said that it was good. They liked it. And yeah, I mean, as a film goer, I like this film. It was really well made. It had a lot of twists. It had a lot of turns. But the horror fan of me is going, no, this is more of a mystery than it is a horror movie.
And they're hunting down.
It's not that great.
They're not hunting down a demon. They're looking for an actual real life person.
Right.
So I just
spoilers.
I didn't care for it. It didn't feel like, other than having Ed and Lorraine in it, it didn't feel like a Conjuring movie to me.
Well,
now, I understand we needed something from the 80s because the timeline is progressing.
Right. And once again, I feel like that this one was supposed to be, because during the 80s, there was the satanic panic where everything was demonized and everything was satanic. So I can't help but feel like that they had to have one of the movies where the Warrens deal with the Satanists.
Well, I feel like they picked this specifically because it was a major part in paranormal history.
Yeah. It's a huge part.
In which the Warrens were very, very minimally involved, other than trying to reap the benefits of it through interviews and books and...
Yeah, but were the Warrens really involved in any of these cases?
A few of them. You know what case I would have liked to have seen them do for The Conjuring 3?
Sure.
The Smurl case.
Smurl case. What is the Smurl case?
Smurl case began in 1974.
Okay.
In West Pittston, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Now, the Warrens weren't called in until 1986. And instantly, Ed and Lorraine knew that the demon they were dealing with in this case was a succubus.
Oh, they knew instantly.
Instantly.
Okay.
Instantly.
Sure.
Yes. They spent several months of investigations with the Smurl family. And then the interesting thing about this case, which it wouldn't have made it into the movie because we've already seen all these exorcisms, which are supposedly solemn exorcisms. The interesting thing about the Smurl case is that this is the first case that the church actually approved a solemn exorcism. Up to this point,
what?
Ed and Lorraine Warren had never gotten a solemn exorcism approved for any of the cases that they worked on. They were all minor rites of exorcism. Do you know how they got this solemn rite of exorcism approved for this case?
To avoid Rule 34?
But you know how they got involved.
How?
They called the church out in the media and said that the church needed to get involved because this family would probably not even make it through the night. And they didn't understand why the church was not approving an exorcism for this poor family. And it became a media circus, as it typically does when Ed and Lorraine Warren are involved. And the church agreed to do a solemn rite of exorcism. They were bullied into doing a solemn rite of exorcism for this family.
Whether they actually wanted to do it or not. Fun.
Whether they believed it was happening or not. The church was bullied into doing a solemn rite of exorcism.
Oh my God, you gotta be kidding me.
This is the first case they ever got a solemn rite of exorcism approved on.
It's the only case.
It might be.
I'm pretty sure it's the only case that they did because of the way that they did that. And I'm willing to bet that if they tried to do it again, the church would have bounced back on them.
But I mean, how cool would that have been for a story for The Conjuring 3?
That would have been cool.
Instead of doing the satanic panic and the devil made me do it case, let's focus on the succubus. I mean,
yeah, like the Warrens versus a sex demon.
That would be a great
Hell
movie.
Yeah, man.
That would be a great movie.
I mean, technically, they still could.
They still could do the Smurl case.
For Pornhub.
They could still do the Smurl case.
For Pornhub.
Please stop. But that's what I would have liked to have seen.
Right.
And it fits the timeline because they were called in 1986. So you've got your story set in the 80s. It was the first case they bullied the church into doing a solemn rite of exorcism. But even better, you've got the perfect villain set up there, the perfect antagonist, a succubus. I mean, come on. I mean, just think of the characters design on that. It would have been great.
Kind of like, what was that movie? Species? Yeah.
Okay. So, overall, I enjoy the Conjuring universe. Are there some things I would change? Some things I don't like? Absolutely. Am I very disappointed in Conjuring 3? Absolutely. Will I watch the next Conjuring universe that comes out? Absolutely. Depending on what it is.
Separating, it's just like separating
Just
the
looking
artist
at
from
them
the
as-
art.
Yeah, just looking at
You
them
know?
as what they are. They are movies that are inspired.
Yeah,
Warrens.
as movies, I am entertained by the
Yes.
Conjuring films. I like them for the most part. They're fun to watch on occasion. Am I going to go see one in a theater?
No.
Probably not. I'm going to wait for that to come on HBO Max
And see it for free.
or sure.
I
Or
enjoyed,
some other streaming.
The only Conjuring movie I saw in the theater was The Nun, and I enjoyed seeing that in the theater.
Yeah. I mean, it was a great.
I had nachos.
Yes, you did. They were good nachos.
You had a veggie burger.
We went to one of those like dine-in movie theaters to see this, and it was nice. It was really
Very
nice.
nice.
Yeah.
I enjoyed dinner and a movie at the same time.
Oh yeah. But overall, as far as the Conjuring verse goes, if they make another one, will I see it? Sure, I'll see it. Am I expecting much from it? Probably not.
I'm expecting it to be better because the direction they went in Conjuring 3, where it wasn't just them investigating a case and them up against paranormal forces or demons, but them instead being up against a person. I feel like we're not the only ones that have issues with that.
Yeah.
I feel like they're going to need to
I can't help but
return
feel like
to
that there's going to be a few people
the-
that are not happy.
Yeah, they're going to need to return to that formula that has worked for them up until now.
Right.
Because that was just bad, I think. But that's my opinion.
I mean, that's pretty much my opinion.
Those are the facts and the various artistic, creative liberties that they took
and
with the
that
story inspirations.
and that is the controversial Conjurverse.
And we're done. Bye.
Score.